Hello and welcome to the only podcast where the average listening time is less than 12 parsecs. I know that doesn't make a ton of sense, but I'm Matt,
I'm Luke.
And I'm Max.
and this is Force for Thought. All right, everyone. Hello and welcome back. We are doing today, as you can tell by the title of this episode, I always like when people introduce like it's a mystery. But
I
it's
know. This person already clicked on this link
Yes.
at least like 1 minute ago with our ads.
That's true. But for us, it's brand new right now until we edit this and look at it on YouTube.
Yeah,
or
surprise me,
Spotify.
Matt. What are we talking about?
We're talking today about Solo. And as you know, Luke, we rewatched Solo. It's been 5 years? Is that why we did it? No.
5 years later, yeah.
5.5.
Okay.
Okay, we can just say 5.
All right. Almost 6 years later, if Max went by...
That's
how
not
he-
a round number. You don't do reviews
how
almost
he-
6 years later.
If Max went by his height, this is round up.
Rounding up to the nearest whole inch, I am 6 feet tall.
And we're going on the 6th year then of Solo, so that's why we did the review.
Maybe I'm 5'11 and a quarter.
Maybe. So, we can structure this kind of like we did Kenobi, just kind of overall thoughts when we first saw it, how our opinion has kind of changed when we rewatched it, kind of what we would rank it out of 10, our favorite characters, our favorite scenes, what we think the strengths are, the weaknesses are, and if we want the story to continue and anything else we want to talk about in between. So let's start off with, when we first saw Solo for the first time in theaters, presumably we all saw it. What did you guys think?
I'll be honest, Matthew. I thought we were discussing Free Solo, that
Jesus.
National Geographic documentary about climbing.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
All right. So I did
So what'd
not
you think
come
of that?
prepared. Anyway, when I first saw Solo,
You mean Solo, a Star Wars story?
gotta be more specific.
I loved it when I first saw it. I remember the person I saw it with, the person we saw it with, because I was at least with Max. I forget if Matt was there. But
I think so, because I was with Max.
all right. Well,
So
that
I
makes
was with
sense
you
'cause I was
too.
talking with our other friend Travis.
Oh, yes, we did. Yeah, so how did we forget Travis was with us?
Well,
and
I
Lynn.
didn't because I remember after we saw it, Travis, or before we saw it, Travis just looked around and was like, "Where is everybody?" Because it was like opening day of a new Star Wars movie and no one was
Yes.
there, and it was just so sad. And then afterward, we were like, "That was super good. Where is everybody?"
Yeah,
And obviously, the film's kind of notorious for being a big box office flop, which is unfortunate. There was a lot of buzz surrounding it at the time regarding some of the production issues behind the scenes going on. They had oh my gosh, I'm blanking on their names now.
Lord
the
and
directors,
Miller.
Lord and Miller, attached to it. They were very comedic, very like improv heavy, and apparently they just had like a lot of disputes with Lucasfilm, so they eventually left, and they brought in Ron Howard. And so there was a lot of that kind of negativity surrounding it that I think led to a lot of low expectations. And
Yeah.
box office wise, that was a shame. Entertainment wise, it kind of worked out for its better because those low expectations made everyone who did see it pretty like surprisingly satisfied with it. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't like a galaxy changing movie by any means.
Yeah.
But everyone who sees it has the same reaction of like, oh wow, that was actually like a really fun movie. And it's like, yes, that's what they wanted. That's all they wanted.
yeah.
It's a
And
fun movie.
I think when, we were looking back at that era and they started doing these A Star Wars story movies, it is weird that there's not a third one. It just feels like that could be its own trilogy if they just made a third one. But, whatever. I digress. In Rogue One versus Solo, Rogue One, third favorite movie, Star Wars movie of all time. We as all, love Rogue One. So when Solo came out, it seemed like the more pulpy version of a Star Wars story. It's like, oh, we went from this really dark and gritty one to this more like poppy one. And so like trailer wise, I'm like, yeah, we all kind of probably shrugged, like we don't really need a Solo story, right? Like maybe when the trailers came out, when we heard it was coming out. But then going to see it, it was an absolute blast. I absolutely had fun with it. I loved it. And there was a lot of controversy, like you said, revolving around the directors and stuff too. And I honestly would love to see the Lord Miller version, what they were doing with it. With that being said, I think Ron Howard did a great job too. We can dive more into that. But yeah, I remember, it's so funny that I don't remember seeing it with you, Luke, but I remember seeing it with Lynn, Max, and Travis. But like you were,
I was definitely there.
you know what? It's actually really funny. I have a picture of you. I believe you're wearing a blue sweater after the movie. I'm going to find it.
Of Solo?
Yes. For some reason, I'm just like, oh, I have to take a picture of Luke. I think it was just like you were standing around, but we walked down the stairs, a couple stairs in the mall, at the AMC at Easton, and then that we had like almost like an hour discussion, I think, afterwards, and how much we loved it. And our friend Travis, who is very lukewarm on Star Wars, absolutely loved Solo. Like, named his cat Kira after the character, like had a poster in his apartment, and like absolutely loved Solo. And so it's like, it is such a fun movie, and I I guess let's get into what we thought about it, 5.5 to 6 years later, somewhere between there, what we thought of it on this rewatch.
I think it just gets better and better.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just my expectations. I know exactly what I'm going to get, and it just fills that need every time.
Yeah.
On rewatch, I notice some things strike me as a little bit more odd. For example, all of the Galaxy's Edge tie-ins. Do you guys notice those every time you rewatch it?
No.
Mm-mm.
What are you talking? Please
There are two moments that
enlighten us.
I just felt like they winked at the camera, but I mean, they obviously didn't. They got past you guys, but
Okay.
in
Calm yourself.
when they're on the Vermilion,
You know what? I do remember this.
Me too, but
But
tell
why
the audience.
Yeah, you explain it.
The first time that they meet Dryden Voss, when they're on the Vermilion the first time and Han and Kira are reunited, Kira says to one of the servers, "Are you attending to Doc Ondar?" And she says yes, and it's like a
That's
throwaway
hilarious.
line. And then later,
Wait, no, Doc Ondar's like bar?
yeah, from
Yeah, okay.
Galaxy's Edge,
Just making sure.
the
Well, Don
Ithorian.
Akadar. Don.
Ooh.
What did I say? What's his name? Don.
Doc Ondar.
Doc Ondar. He's not the bar. He has the Den of Antiquities in Galaxy's Edge.
Yeah,
Yes.
It's like
He's
a
the
shop.
merchant.
Yeah, the shop where you buy the lightsabers.
Yeah, you're right. Yes. What's the bar?
The
cantina.
Uga's Cantina.
Yes,
yes,
Uga's
yes, sorry.
Cantina. And then another moment when Lando and L3 are introduced, and Lando says that she has the best navigational system in the galaxy, and L3 says that you couldn't get from here to Black Spire without me. And Black Spire Outpost is
Wow.
How have I never noticed?
I
These?
have never noticed that either. That is genius, Luke.
I
Thank
watch
you
these
so
with
much for.
subtitles too.
That's even more upsetting, Max. Okay, well at least I have an excuse.
you don't watch with subtitles.
No, I cannot.
that
Unless it's
surprises
foreign
me.
language, I can't
You're
do
an
it.
animal.
You gotta listen to the sound design. I can't be
You're
distracted.
listening. Yeah, it helps sometimes. But those moments stand out to me, and also the lack of C-3PO and R2-D2 stand out to me now, because they're in every other movie. And at the time, I remember a lot of people were theorizing whether or not they'd be in this movie, because they were in Rogue One. So
Yeah.
it's like, it's not a Star Wars story that's the cutoff for where they are and aren't going
Yes.
to be. And at the time, they had a Kenobi movie in the works, a Jabba movie in the work, like a whole bunch of just Kenobi, a Star Wars story, Jabba, a Star Wars story. They had delusions of grandeur looking back of all these Star Wars stories that they were going to come out with.
Yeah.
And it was not realistic that R2 and 3PO would be able to make a cameo in every single one of those, so they had to cut that cord eventually. But looking back, that Solo's the last one, it's like, you could have gotten them in, and it would have been fine.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, now that there's the 11 Star Wars movies and R2 and 3PO are absent from just this one, looking back, it's kind of a bummer.
I guess that's true. I think, with that being said, I think where we're at now with 3PO and R2, seeing them in Ahsoka, seeing 3PO and Ahsoka, seeing R2 and Mando, I feel like we wouldn't have gotten to that point without them in Solo. It's like I feel like they were like, okay, we should stick to this formula. I feel like it was a step that they were just. I'm sure they have a scene, to be honest, that's cut, There has to be.
wonder that myself.
right? Because there's no way they're like, just for safety. let's see.
Their use in Rogue One though was just like, I mean, it was just a fun cameo. Like it really served no purpose.
How many times can you do that? Well, like we were talking
Yeah.
earlier about spoiler the MCU.
Yeah.
How many times can you wake up in a different multiverse?
Yeah, just kind of rely on the same tricks. But I wanted to contrast that with C-3PO and Ahsoka, which I feel like was actually done very well. Like he
Yes.
served a purpose because we knew like how are they going to get a young Leia in here? Like are they going to
Yeah.
CGI recast? What are they going to do? And instead it's like, oh, she sent C-3PO in her set. Like, oh, that's perfect.
Perfect, love it.
Yeah, like that was such a smart use of that. And I just feel like there wouldn't have been a place for that in Solo, and I'm glad that they didn't.
There wouldn't have been a place. It would have definitely been the hardest one to include them in.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's like it would be one of those things where they pass them by on the street or something. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, but then that becomes distracting sometimes. It's not like sometimes it isn't fun and more being like, oh, eye roll. And I think it might have been an eye roll moment, which is why because I guarantee like we just said that they had to have filmed something and be like, I don't think this works.
Kind of like in Rogue One when they're in the streets of Jeddah and they just kind of bump into Dr. Evazan
Yes.
and Panda Baba.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
exactly
do like that though, but it's
I
like,
do too, but a lot of people give it crap.
yes, because it is heavy handed, but you're like, oh.
Yeah.
It is odd. It's like the only thing they could have done like weirder is to bump into the band from the cantina, like while they're carrying their instruments around or something.
All of the modal nodes.
Just like walking. Can you imagine with like what do their instrument cases look like? Who knows? Intricacies Part 2 coming soon. But Maxwell, what did you think of it? Or Luke, do you have anything else? I mean, I'm sure you do.
No, nothing else high level.
All right, I lied.
The things that always stick out to me, like Luke said, how it when you rewatch it, it just kind of gets better. It's because whenever you see something for the first time,
Yeah.
you're always very nervous that something's going to happen that you don't like, and there's going to be things that you don't know in the moment how you feel about it.
Yes.
And then after reflection, you might realize, like, I did not like that they did that. But over time, once you just kind of accept that fact that it happened, you kind of move past it and you kind of start to like appreciate all the good things around it. And then I feel like you take it one step farther, kind of like what we're seeing now with the prequels
Yeah.
over 20 years later,
Yeah.
where people start to like almost enjoy those things that are bad about it as well.
Yeah.
And I feel like right now where we are with Solo is, yeah, there are some things in it that I don't like. There's a lot of fan service that isn't done well. We did not need to know how Solo got his last name. That could have just been his last name. Like things like that. It's like, okay, we didn't need that. But now that we know it's there, when it happens, you're just kind of like, okay, yeah, I know that's a thing. And then you just move on to the next scene. And then it's like, you just kind of like enjoy the parts that you do enjoy more, like Han and Chewie's shower together. That'll always be enjoyable for me. I think that is such a funny beat.
Yeah, it is. That's that it? That's what you think? That's it? It's your new thoughts for rewatching?
Yeah,
I guess
you know,
that's
a lot of people-
that's a great overview, I guess, actually, of it.
Yeah, a lot of people always give Andor credit for being the first Star Wars property with implied sex, but in that shower, it was pretty
Yikes.
steamy.
That's hilarious. What did you guys? I want to get into my thoughts too, but what did you guys think of the crawl? Because that's something that we're kind of glossing over. I feel like it's a different
The crawl
version of a
is
crawl.
probably the most
or
singular.
the not crawl.
Yeah, we can call it the not crawl, I guess. It's probably the largest instance of a thumbs down I give for the movie.
Yeah.
I don't see why they included it. The setting and story of this movie does not need opening narration or a crawl
Yeah.
to get you up to speed. Like A New Hope started it because you're in the middle of a story, and every other movie does it because they just keep doing it. And Rogue One famously did not, well, in my mind at least, Rogue One did not do it because they didn't need it. And this movie didn't need it either. I mean, what does the crawl say? That there's a gangs are rivals over each other and divided for fuel and food and hyper fuel.
It's all information that you learn in the first 2
Yes.
minutes.
Yes, and
Yeah.
the information that you learn in the 2 minutes is still rather McClunky exposition. And it's like you can either do some McClunky exposition or clunky crawl. I'd rather you not do either, but please don't do both.
I feel like because the first time we saw Rogue One, it was such a mystery how the movie was going to start. We didn't know if it was
Yeah,
gonna
it was a
loved
big news
it.
article or a big news point.
It
that-
literally just like the sound just cuts in and it's like bum, and you're there.
Yep.
And like I remember it's like jarring in the theaters. You're like, oh, okay, it started.
Yes.
And I feel like that was like such a weird moment that by the time they got to Solo, and Ron Howard even took over the project, there was probably last minute discussions of being like, I don't know how we're starting this movie. Are we just cutting in like that? And then it was like, well, what if we did a crawl? Well, you can't do a crawl. It's not a Skywalker Saga movie. And it's like, okay, well, let's do some text on screen maybe to ease people into it.
Yes, and that's my biggest thing actually is that I love the way this movie starts after the crawl.
Yes, I
The
was just going to
music
say
and the
that.
sparks.
When Max said that about the Rogue One
Yes.
hard entrance, like Solo has that. It just
does.
has a clunky crawl right before
Yes.
a McClunky crawl.
And that's the thing when I was rewatching is it does, your heart is racing when you're like, how's it gonna start? How's it gonna start?
Mm-hmm.
And when you're watching Star Wars, part of it is like there's the intro and it's so quiet. Lucasfilm, right? So quiet. And then all of a sudden there's a beat, and then all of a sudden your heart literally jumps because it is so loud. Watching it every single time still. It just gets you. Like it doesn't scare you necessarily, but it's just like it makes your heart swell up and you see the crawl and you're excited, and then it goes into this wondrous music and you're in space. Every time, and it works. And so when Rogue One just jumps into it, you're there, you're instantly part of it. And then in Solo, the music starts so well, and all of a sudden it's the same thing when Luke throws the lightsaber behind him. It just kind of deflates you a little bit. Where it's like, okay, now I'm reading, but it's not the crawl, and it's just more of a slideshow, and it feels like if they were going to do something like that, they should have just done something interesting and new versus having just like three PowerPoint slides in like the. And honestly, the way the text is confusing because it doesn't look nice and neat and organized. It's like bigger and smaller, and like it's so weird. And then, which is so funny, I listen to the soundtrack a lot, Solo, because I think Solo soundtrack is phenomenal.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
so it's weird to like rewatch Solo because I listen to the soundtrack significantly more than I watch the movie, and so I'm like, oh, I love this song when it starts, and then I forget that it's accompanied by these cool sparks as he's trying to hotwire this car or the speeder, and then it's like, oh my god, if you went from nothing to the sparks igniting and that music, you have a 10 out of 10 solid intro, but they don't do it.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's. I don't know that much about making movies, so maybe you'll have some more insight on this, Matt. But
Maybe.
if it's like a victim of the changing directors and writers late in the game, relatively late in the game, because it's also like a very tonal inconsistency that
Yeah.
you're expecting a Star Wars movie. That expectation will never change, and we're expecting a crawl, even if we know we're not going to get one, just because of there's so many
Yeah.
Star Wars movies and so iconic. And Rogue One did a great job by having that hard entrance, and it's like it matches that high intensity and gets you right into it. But then Solo does a soft entrance with a crawl, but the music is really slow and
Yeah.
like
Yes.
it's not like a hype music
No.
like the opening crawl to Star Wars, and it's not exciting or interesting like getting you right into it like in Rogue One. But then right after the crawl, it is really exciting and interesting, and it's just tossing you back and forth,
Yep.
and it seems so inconsistent.
Well, what's interesting, I mean, Rogue One and Solo are the only two Star Wars story anthology movies, and that's why we keep bringing it up so much. But Rogue One did have a lot of the same issues. I mean, they did bring in Tony Gilroy like towards the end of the movie
Yeah.
to help Gareth Edwards. Like there was still like that same kind of butting of heads, I think, or difference in views. I don't know. What do they call it? Creative differences.
Mhm.
And yet they kind of produced both very, very different products. But it is always interesting to me whenever I rewatch it, trying to figure out what was Ron Howard's creation and what was Lord and Miller, because we know that a lot of Lord and Miller stuff is still in there, and there's always like random jokes that I'm like, I bet that was a Lord and Miller thing. I bet that was improvised. The biggest example is when Beckett is on the turrets and he's like
Yes.
they get shot or whatever, and he's like, ow, it hurt my thumbs. Like it's such a weird line, and I was like, I bet Lord and Miller did that, and they just told him like just improvise something, and he just thought that was silly, and they
Yeah.
liked it.
For the record, I like that. I think that's silly, and I'm glad that it's in the
Well,
movie.
it made the cut, so Ron Howard liked it too.
I think that's a good moment.
But then I also always think about the interviews with Paul Bettany, who plays Dryden Voss, and how he said that the way he got into this film was when Ron Howard was brought on. He begged Ron Howard to bring him with him. He's like, I love Star Wars. I would love to be in a Star Wars movie. So it's like, what was Lord and Miller's vision? Like, what was it
Yeah.
without Dryden Voss? Was Kira the
don't know.
bad guy? Was Maul more of a presence?
I don't know.
There's no way it was
I'm so
Maul. I think it was either
curious.
Kira or Beckett was more of a bad guy. But I've thought that too, because it's also kind of noticeable, maybe just because I've seen that interview where Paul Bettany was obviously brought on by Ron Howard, but he's only in that one setting. Like it's two different scenes
Yep,
before
I
and
know.
after the heist, but he's only in that one place. They could have
That's
filmed
what-
that in 2 days.
That's what
Right.
that's what gets me on the rewatch. And something else on the rewatch that I'm just kind of now connecting is that I love how quick the movie is, but the first 40 minutes are fast. And I think that is more or less the Lord and Miller stuff, to be honest, because when we're moving so fast, and I bet Kira, you don't see Kira. I guarantee she probably was the bad guy because you don't see her forever. So how interesting is it that, you know, he shows up somewhere and she's the bad guy? But instead, you know, because we go from them being together to then him being in the war to then him being part of their gang, then robbing the train, then everyone dies in the first 40 minutes, and then they get to the other stuff, which I feel like the other stuff is all Ron Howard, I would imagine, or not all of it, but like I have a feeling they probably ebbed and flowed, but everything with Paul Bettany then goes in the middle. And that is something that is very apparent because I'm just like, wow, this movie really cooks. Like, I'm just like, I was in a million settings in 40 minutes. I'm just like, what even just happened?
Yeah, and it also, you can see the effects of the creative differences and stuff when what's her name, Thandie Newton is
Yeah,
like
yeah.
on the poster, and one of the top billed, like she's on her name is on like the top starring
Yeah.
actors, and then she dies so soon for one, but also rather unceremoniously. Like I feel like she originally didn't die in that scene. and then
1000%.
They came back and was like, all right, actually, you go here and you die now, and you're not going to be in the rest of the movie.
I think that's with the whole crew, because that's something that's like one of my biggest complaints of the movies. I like how that it moves really fast, but those characters are so cool, and you start to love those characters. How much more interesting would that be if they died an hour or something in? And that's the same thing. L3 dies an hour and 20 minutes in, and she's not even in the movie for the first 30 minutes. So L3's only in the movie for like an hour, if that. And that's being generous, I think. And then the same thing with the upfront characters with Beckett and that whole Jon Favreau and Thandie Newton, is that they both die pretty fast, and you were just like, oh, okay, so this isn't the main story we're following, and that feels like the Lord Miller stuff. I would imagine to be like, oh, okay, now the movie's changing, but at the same time, I do like that aspect of it because it gives you some more insight to Han Solo to be like, everybody he's around does kind of die.
I know.
And so it's like, oh, no wonder why he's so begrudging to even join anybody with Luke and Leia and stuff in like Empire, when he's like, I'm going to leave. It's like, oh yeah, because he's used to that because everyone dies around him. And so it's like, it does add to his character a bit, but I don't know if that's 100% on purpose.
I had a similar thought that a lot of the movie's flaws are like objective flaws for a movie, but
Yeah.
for a Han Solo spinoff, it kind of makes it
Yes,
better.
I agree. But even then, besides, I was talking about the music and how I listen to that more. I think Ron Howard does an amazing job directing. And it's something I love the settings, whether it's Lord Miller, whether it's Ron Howard. The intro, that whole city is so cool. I'm like, I would like to spend so much more time in there, but that's what Star Wars does really well.
On Corellia.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's at like within the tunnels and within the city and in those on those roads and stuff, just like everything around it. You're like, whoa, if they go into those hills, like that'd be a whole different setting. But I think that Solo does something really well, which is it gives you a lot to look at, and that gives you rewatch value. Because most of the time, you're paying attention to what you're supposed to be paying attention to. But then you can rewatch it and be like, oh my God, look at all that surrounding, actually. That's amazing to look at. Yeah. And it does it for the entire movie. It's the moodiest Star Wars movie, I think, ever. Because it's dark, and it's like even that bright blue color when they're with the worm creature, I can't think of the name,
Lady
comes
Proxima.
out. Thank you. Comes out. It's like, it's so blue, it's so stylized. And then beyond that, when he goes to meet Lando, it's like it's so
yellow,
golden, it's yellow, and it's only basically that light is in the middle shining down. It looks like the Batman the Animated Series Almost Got Him table, because everything else is like surrounded by like this gray and mist, and it doesn't allow you to really fully see something. It gives you that dreamlike state the entire movie, and I absolutely love it because I don't think any other Star Wars movie does it really like that.
I agree. The setting and the production design and the creature design, which I'll get into more later.
Yes.
It's all exceptional, and it looks so much better on a rewatch because we've only seen Star Wars TV for the last 4 years.
Yes.
Everyone's been saying like, oh, the quality's not as good, and I've never really understood it, but I'm starting to get it now after watching Solo. Like even just that first speeder chase on Corellia, like I was watching that, and it's super good. Like this is an excellent action sequence.
Yeah.
And I think I was just like taking it for granted in media in general in the mid to late 2010s. Like it was all just a lot better than it has been lately. Maybe it's COVID, maybe it's the TV, or everyone's going broke from streaming, but it's really, really good.
I do think we'll get back to somewhere interesting as well, because I feel like right now there is this push and pull where it's like, well, maybe we don't need to make everything so fast all the time, right? Or maybe we don't need, like, I love Star Wars on a weekly basis, but like you're right, like, I mean, I do love watching Ahsoka and everything, but it's like, man, like, you can definitely tell what $45 million can get you or $200 million can get you, right? Like there is just a difference, right? And obviously with the
over
volume,
a less period of time too, which I think is
that's
a two-sided equation, right? Because when you're working with a TV show, it's like a minimum 5 hours worth of content, and you're spreading however much, like 30 million over that, as opposed to 120 minutes worth of content. I don't know why I said it minutes. 2 hours worth of content. And you have significantly more budget to spend on each of that. I agree. Going back to the creature design, it does have great creature designs, and it has good trooper design. I'm a sucker for a new trooper design, and there is a new trooper on Corellia during that chase in the very beginning. When he's getting away, and it's very subtle, but it is a unique trooper design.
This is very random, but Michael from Rexing Around was in Ahsoka. Did you guys see that?
I did.
Yeah.
He was one of the he was one
The
of
death-
Thrawn's
yeah.
troopers. Yeah.
The red boys.
Yeah, so that's 2 projects that he's in now.
I know.
Lucasfilm, we would love nothing more than to be a background actor in anything else.
Yes, nothing else. And then I'll slip you the script to Rikers, which is Max and I's show that we've been writing.
You're gonna love it. It's fantastic. It's already written.
Everyone loves, everyone in the industry loves when they say, I'll give you a script,
Yeah.
I bet.
I think about this consistently. There was this interview where like Matt Damon was giving a speech or something. Do you guys you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-mm.
And some guy it was like, hey, like this guy gave you your break because of your script was so good. So how about you give me mine? And it's so awkward. He's like in front of like 300 people in an auditorium,
Cringe.
and then like somebody has to come over and just like take the guy away, and it's
Aw.
like he shot his shot, and it was so awkward.
Yeah.
At least you guys have the decency to do it in your own echo chamber of a podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I also
Yeah.
wanted to before we got too far off of, is it Tandy Newton? Is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah.
Thandy or Tandy?
I was saying
think it's
Thandy.
right.
I don't know.
I think it's Tandy. Tandy. I think you say Tandy.
I don't know how to pronounce it, but in preparation for this, I did watch the behind the scenes on Disney Plus, and they have that like 10-minute round table with them, and I did think about how quickly she was killed off because she was part of the round table, and it was like her and like the rest of the main cast, like exactly who you would expect. And so it's just funny hearing her input on this film that she was in for like 10 minutes or so,
Yeah.
which was really like profound. And like she drew like a lot of inspiration from like her mother and like her struggles and stuff like that. And it was like really good stuff that she really brought to the table in this character who was only on screen for about 10 minutes.
She's a great actor. I mean, she was in Westworld around the same time too, and I just feel like it was like her moment. Oh,
That's got to be so awkward in the round table. She's like with, I'm not going to say all the actors because I won't. No, I think I can. She's with like Donald Glover and Phoebe Waller-Bridge. It's like, oh, I never acted with you, and Dryden Voss and Emilia Clarke. It's like, oh, never had any. Oh, did I say Dryden Voss?
Yeah.
Paul Bettany. I know that one too. It's like she had never had scenes with almost any of the other characters besides Alden Ehrenreich, and she's here on this round table. She probably never even met that half of them.
That's true.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't even think about that. One person who you didn't say was Jonas Swoboda, and I want to talk about him real quick too,
She had
because
scenes with him.
I love when Star Wars actors love Star Wars, and I feel like it shines through. Maybe it's just because I know it, but I feel like it really does shine through. And Jonas is one of those people who, like just like watching him in the interviews is like so excited to be Chewbacca, and he absolutely relishes it. And I wanted to give him a shout out because Luke ran into him at Galaxy's Edge one time.
Yeah, I've met him. I got a picture with him. It was really exciting. And then all the people that were around me, I was alone in Disneyland. And then all the people, strangers like all around me after he walked away was like, "Yo, who was that?" And I was like, "He plays Chewbacca." And they're like, "Oh shit, really?" Yeah, I felt like a
What part of the park did you see him?
Not in the Star Wars part. I forget. I don't know.
Was it the
that
Pioneer
well.
part? Why do I?
It was like the Western
Yes,
part.
yeah, yeah.
Is that Pioneer?
Because
Okay.
it was Disneyland, not Disney World, correct? In California.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Also, you said Disneyland. Well, that would have been a different episode, but you said Disneyland instead of Disney World, which is so interesting. That's all.
But I wanted to talk. I didn't realize that it wasn't in the Star Wars part. That makes a lot more sense because I always think about that story when you told me that you ran into him, because you said you just like kind of turned around and he was like right there, like no crowd or anything, and you were like, "Hey, Jonas," and you were like, "Yeah," and you were like, "Can I get a picture?" He's like, "Yeah."
It was also 2021, and so most people were wearing masks, and so it must have been a blessing for all celebrities that they get recognized 1/20th as often. But he's like 6'8", and
Yeah,
so I just
and he was
kinda
wearing
shot my
the
shot.
Chewbacca mask too, right?
No, he was not. He was just
So it
some-
was the costume, no mask.
it was just some guy that was like super tall, and it kind of looked like Jonas, and I was like, it could be, and I'm gonna kick myself if I don't try.
Yeah, good for you. I also love the war scenes. I think the war scenes are so good in
On
this.
Mimban,
Yes,
yeah.
it is. And you know what? Something else I was thinking about. We never really see the perspective of somebody fighting with AT-ATs or ATSTs, and so it's usually against. It's an opposition to. And so to see Beckett and Solo fighting kind of with them and seeing how much destruction these are doing, I loved, because usually it's trying to take those things down. Usually it's a plot point, but it's like no, it was really cool to see.
It was. It's unfortunate how quick that moment lasted too. And I wonder if that was filmed in the volume because again, it's one of those scenes where it's like the background is very obscured by light and smoke and everything, so you can't
I
see
don't think
very
it
deep at all.
existed yet.
Yeah, the Mandalorian was created, or the volume
yeah,
was
that's
created
right.
for the Mandalorian.
And this
Yeah.
would have been what was it? 2018.
2018. So I guess only a year
before.
prior.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, they
But-
probably were like, "We have this thing, but you can't use it yet."
Yeah, that's true. That's
Um,
interesting.
The Solo scene when he gets his last name.
It's growing on me.
It does it. It's not.
I liked it a lot
really.
more on this rewatch. Yeah.
I still would say it is maybe in the top 2 worst moments in Star Wars history.
Oof.
But because they play it so straight, because they're like when the guy and it's clearly a directive from like Ron Howard, and that seems like a Ron. I was gonna say the crawl and this scene specifically seem like a Ron Howard thing, not because he's a bad director, not because he has bad instincts, but I think it's because it's his generation thing to be like, oh well, we need to do that for fan service. It feels like your grandpa's
I
or your
agree.
dad's types. Same thing with the crawl is that he's like, well, we need to put the crawl in because it's Star Wars. How do we do it? Versus Gareth Edwards, who I think is like, we don't need the crawl. It's like its own thing. We can leave it separately. It just feels a little different. I'm saying that like it's our dad's generation thing, but like Gareth Edwards is like our dad's generation. I feel like, maybe not, but I feel like when the guy says, and he like looks up and it feels like it's supposed to be like Ollivander and Harry Potter when he's like, I know just the wand for you. Like it's like.
Yeah.
I just hate how straight they play it. And it's like, man, you feel it cringing in your seat a little bit to like, oh. But with that being said, it's not nearly as bad. It's not nearly because so even the worst, what I would say the worst moment in Star Wars is when Luke throws the lightsaber behind his back, just completely deflated 3 years, of waiting.
Wow. And yet it's still your favorite movie of all Star Wars.
It's
That's
the
crazy.
podcast's favorite, but I mean but like again, even though these are bad moments, doesn't mean really anything.
Mm-hmm. The moment is growing on me more and more as I rewatch it because it's so tied to out of the Star Wars universe. Like we knew that we were gonna get a reveal on how Solo got his name. Like that was in the news before the movie came out, and everyone thought it was super dumb already going into the movie. And now you still have that expectation because you're gonna see that scene again. But like if you try to take that out of it and just think in universe, it is really sad. Like it's a good character beat that Han is alone and he didn't know his parents. He never got a last name with the White Worms. He is alone, and it's kind of a bureaucratic technicality that they just need to put a last name in. But it does have a bit of a character impact on him. So I like it more and more.
I would say I am disliking it less and less, more than liking it more and more.
That just seems like a pessimist's way to answer the same thing I did.
No, because when you say it's growing on you, it's going in the direction of you liking it. And I understood your defense, and I guess I agree with what you said. I don't know. But I don't know if I'm ever going to like that moment. I think I dislike it. But because I know it's coming, it kind of softens the blow a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Like Matt said, like with throwing the lightsaber over Luke's shoulder, like that was kind of like 3 years of speculation, or 2 years, I guess. 2 years of speculation and theories just kind of like out the window, and like that feeling of like deflation.
Yeah.
Whereas now, you know it's coming, and you're like, okay, yeah, he does this. That's a beat. We move past it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I feel about that part of him getting Solo. But then it just gets muddied even further with Rey and the ending of that movie, and it's like, Rey who? And it's like, why?
Yeah.
People don't need last names. That's not a normal question to ask.
Yeah.
Like it was weird when they did it in Solo. It was weird when they did it in Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
Greedo doesn't have a last name. No one's saying what is Greedo's last name. It's just Greedo.
I would like it much better, like in Mandalorian, if before we knew his name was Din Djarin. So what's your last name? Lorian. Mandalorian.
Man.
Yeah, I don't know. That scene irks me, obviously, but like it's not terrible. It's not like it's still an eye roll, but it's not it's not like, I don't know, it's fine. It doesn't like affect the rest of the movie. I think what really helps it too.
No. Yeah, it's a very small part, and you move past it.
Is his response to it though, his reaction to it. Like he looks sad, so it's like that works. But I think we talk about how L3 kind of dies a little bit too quick. I always forget about all the Wookiees they find.
Yeah.
I love that.
I don't know if
scene.
I've ever noticed that there was more than just the one
Oh really?
extra one.
There's
yeah.
a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I love when Chewie, like, they're basically telling him to come with them, and he decides not to. it's such a good moment of like
It's way
absolute
better
panic.
knowing that there's other Wookiees, because I always thought it was
Yeah.
like kind of a thirst trap that Sagwa is like, "Yo, come live with me," and he's like, "Okay, we just met, no thank you." But no, there was a whole tribe there he could have joined.
I'm not a whore.
and
Right.
and that's the thing though, is that just like he can be with his people again, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like very sad that he doesn't, and he knows he's on his mission, and Han, like, you know, they're becoming buds, and he
Because
saves him.
Han is his people.
Yeah.
Han started as a solo. He didn't have people, and now he's finding people.
I know, exactly. Yeah,
beautiful.
and I also do love the going into his character a bit more is why he can't trust anybody. Is that double cross with Kira and then Beckett? You know, I think it's like, wow, that is so smart actually to like make his character a little more deep, to be like, wow, that is a double cross, and then it's kind of a triple cross to be like,
Lando also.
yeah, that still kind of irks me when Lando just randomly just like he's like bye, and was like,
Oh no, I love that.
damn
I was
it.
referring to Lando cheating at Sabak
oh yeah, that's great.
to win the game. That's another would breed trust issues.
Lando is a character we haven't really talked about yet, and Don Glover does a great performance, and something that I think that Billy D. Williams does, and I think it's one of those things where you just have the character develops, is that Lando is so suave in this movie, but I don't think he has like that likable personality, which I think it's on purpose. I don't say likable personality, but like to Han, like he obviously does with L3, but he's very standoffish still, and so it is like they are conflicting elements, I think, in this movie, which is fine. It makes sense. Like they always kind of have that relationship, and when we see them in Empire, they clearly do still, but it's a very soft relationship where I think they're still very rough around the edges when they first meet, which makes a lot of sense because they just met.
Two things that I just thought about. One, going back to this trust issues thing. You know, that's interesting because at the
Thank
very
you.
end of the movie, Han Solo kills Beckett, and he said, like, what does he say? He's like, oh, I guess you did something about learning his lesson or
What does
something.
Beckett say?
Yeah.
He says like, "Good job, because I would have shot you." Is that what you're thinking?
Didn't he, before he died, he had said, like, he has, like, one last lesson or something like that? I forget.
Yeah, he was saying.
But it was to
I think
trust
he was
no one. It was
saying,
a
"I have one more
recall-
lesson left to teach you," and it's gonna be. It would have been shoot first, but he does shoot first.
Yeah, and it was to kind of a recall, right, to when you first see him and he says trust no one, right? And it's
Mhm.
kind of like, oh, like Han did learn from Beckett. He did know not to trust him. But I wonder if in that moment what Chewbacca was thinking, where he was like, you know, we're cool though, right? Like, I know you just said like,
Chewbacca and Beckett.
no, Chewbacca and Han.
Han.
Like Han just like basically double crossed Beckett, and he's like, don't worry, you told me not to trust anyone. I don't trust anyone. And Chewbacca's like, but we're cool, right?
I
Like,
could
feel
have been with
we've
my
got
people.
there. Yeah.
Do you think the Beckett line when he says you should shoot first is reminiscent of how Han shot first in A New Hope?
There's definitely a similarity
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Sorry, that one didn't hit as hard. The Han and Han stuff I love.
Oh, perfect.
It's
That
perfect.
that is an excellent moment of fan service that just makes sense in universe
Yep.
and out of universe.
Yeah, I feel like we're talking a lot about the negative fan service. There is a lot of fan service done
Oh,
well
yeah.
in the movie. The Han is one of them. That is fantastic. Okay, I thought of another one that I don't like actually, so this is a bad example.
What is it?
When Chewbacca introduces himself and Han says,
Yeah.
"Chewbacca, that's way too long. I'm going to need to shorten that."
Yeah, that
It's
is a
like-
bad one.
Okay.
Which also feels like it feels like a Ron Howard thing. Like it feels like an older guy thing to do.
I agree, but I know
It
Ron
just-
Howard
it just
makes movies
yells-
I like.
It just yells boomer.
Yeah,
to
it
you.
does. It does.
Boomer energy.
Something else I really love is Woody Harrelson. Woody Harrelson, for some reason, always disappears on a role for me. I love Cheers. It's one of my favorite shows of all time, and he is a main character in Cheers. He plays Woody the bartender after Coach dies in real life, and so he comes in and he plays Woody from seasons 3 to 11. So he's in it for a very long time, or is it? Maybe 4. But either way, 3 to 11 to say. And like I love Cheers, and I do not see the same character, the same person at all. And then he's in True Detective, and then he is in White Man Can't Jump, and I just do not, for some reason, Woody Harrelson is one of those actors that I just believe him in every single role he's in.
Yeah.
Like I just do not see him. Like I'm just like, yeah, that is Beckett. Like I don't see Woody from Cheers. I don't see him in White Man Can't Jump. I can't, he's just like, yep, that's Beckett. And he's a huge star.
Yeah, I mean, I would say he's probably the biggest star in the movie, right? The most recognizable, the biggest
The
name.
Longest, probably. Because Donald Glover's pretty big, though, right?
Paul
Yeah,
Bettany's a
Donald
big
Glover's
star,
big,
too.
but he's,
Yeah.
I mean, he's still fairly recent, right?
Yeah.
I
Young
mean, he's-
person big.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's interesting you say that about Woody Harrelson. I disagree. I think Woody
Interesting.
Harrelson is. I like him in Solo and in most other movies I've actually seen him in, but I think he plays a very similar character in all of them. And every time I see him, it's like that's Woody Harrelson because he has the same accent every time, and it's like an American Southern accent.
Yeah.
And so
No, you're thinking of Matthew McConaughey.
it's very similar to Matthew McConaughey.
But,
But-
Matthew McConaughey is one where he gets lost in the roles. You don't think it's Matthew McConaughey.
I
I
still
agree
do.
with Matt on this.
I think
True
it's-
Detective.
You know it's Woody Harrelson, but you don't like. It doesn't jump out at you as like, oh, that's just Woody Harrelson being Woody Harrelson. Like the best example is The Rock, right? Like The Rock is just The Rock. Like
Yeah.
he doesn't really have any range. He just plays himself in every single thing that he does.
That's true, but that's because The Rock is not a fantastic actor. I mean, Woody Harrelson and Matthew McConaughey are fantastic actors, but I think there's a level between being a fantastic actor and being lost in a role. Like Leonardo DiCaprio, in my mind, can get lost in a role, and he just changes more than just like his acting. He changes like his voice,
Yeah.
and I don't know.
It's
I don't want to get too into
No, it's not
acting
even about the
theory,
acting
but-
because when I see Leonardo DiCaprio, I'm like, oh, that's just Leonardo DiCaprio. But for some reason, again, it's like, what the? I think it's maybe because of the genres. To be honest, I'm now just realizing, like, again, Cheers, half hour
because it's all very different genres.
sitcom. Yeah, you know, White Man Can't Jump, comedy drama, 90s, True Detective, very much a drama thriller. And also, did you guys see that thing with Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson? Because they're like best friends, but there's like a slight
Of
chance
course
they
they are.
actually might be related or brothers. Because like it was,
Brothers.
give it a Google. I'm not sure if anything came of it, but
Interesting.
there was some weirdness.
Well, to bring it back to Star Wars, though, to talk about like actors like getting lost in the role or just sticking out, I think a good example of an actor sticking out and not blending into their role was in Mandalorian season 3 in that episode with Lizzo and Jack Black, and I think that's exactly why
Yes.
people did not like that was because they did not see their characters; they only saw Jack Black and Lizzo.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and that does not age well with all Lizzo allegation stuff getting canceled.
Yeah, that.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah, that's
Well,
that's
hey.
a whole other conversation. That's why Disney and or MCU shouldn't rely on those types of things.
I agree, and also not
yeah.
saying I don't want to wish anybody ill harm or hopefully Lizzo didn't do anything bad, and hopefully the people that were affected by that are totally fine. But it's a guarantee that we'll never see her again in the MCU or in Star Wars. So
That's
Yeah.
true.
come see, come saw,
But also, sorry, real quick, before we leave the actors, because we didn't talk about Alden Ehrenreich, and I want to talk about him a lot too, because there was a lot of controversy around
Yes.
him before the movie came out.
It didn't
because
matter who it was,
There was a bunch of rumors, though, that they got this kid and he couldn't act, and they had to bring in like these acting
yeah.
coaches, and they had to like really help his performance a lot. And that was kind of also like front of mind for me when I was watching it the first time, like in theaters, and afterwards, immediately
Yeah.
afterwards, and even upon rewatch, I'm like, he was fine, like he was great.
He was
actually.
stellar, yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely no complaints.
I remember
about him.
that part in particular that people were worried about, that they were brought in. I think it was like dialect coaches to get him closer to Harrison Ford's accent.
You
Or something.
you can't.
But it's like,
do
oh
it,
no,
you know?
they want this actor to be the best version he could possibly be. I'm so nervous. Like, of course they're gonna bring in coaches to make him better. Why do you want them not to?
Yeah, and also it's just like he ends up doing his own thing, and it works out really well because I don't think you can't replicate Harrison Ford, right? That's the same. It's just impossible to do,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like he did his own thing with it, and I think it worked out really well. I think he's great. I think all the acting is great. I think Phoebe Waller-Bridge is great as L3. Donald Glover is great as Lando. Like literally, I'm so excited, fingers crossed, to see that movie. Also I don't know, just so much to. I don't know. I think everyone's great.
I think all the casting worked out very well. So well, in fact, that I would be okay with them recasting the main Star Wars heroes and having Donald Glover and Alden Ehrenreich return as those characters post Return of the Jedi.
That'd be interesting. Yeah, I'd be fine with that.
Yeah.
Um,
I
Bold
don't think they would
statement.
do that,
No, I don't think so either.
but I would be okay with it.
I also think Paul Bettany gives a really good performance
He
in this
does.
movie that people very rarely talk about.
He's a good villain.
He's a great villain.
Yeah, he looks a good. But I think it is that thing though when it's just like he's only in those two settings. And that's
Mhm.
it. It is weird because I think it is. You do start to notice that you're like, well, what was it originally? Like what was that? Why are we just back here now?
Mm-hmm.
Why is this gold?
But they still give him a lot to do, like character wise and plot wise. And I
Yeah.
really like Dryden Voss.
Same.
Yeah.
Also a great name. So we talked about a lot of positives and negatives so far. Do you guys have anything else to say? Kind of strengths and weaknesses. I have a couple other, I guess, like segments, but
I
anything
have
else?
more strengths than weaknesses, but I guess I'll just rip through my
Please do.
weaknesses real quick. Getting the blaster, kind of lame.
Oh yeah,
There's a lot of parts about Han Solo that they address in this movie, and most of them are like really interesting. But this one, Beckett just kind of tosses it to him, and it's like, okay, this will be my favorite blaster forever now.
Yeah.
It's not like
I-
that significant that Beckett gave it to him, or
I
maybe
disagree.
it's just that it's his first job.
I'm okay with that. I think if they tried to make a bigger deal about that, it would have been clunky and it would have been. No, I'm fine that that's just how he got his blaster, and I kind of like that it was just matter of fact.
I kind of wish it was Beckett's blaster. Like after he kills him, Beckett gives it to him, like he is passing on the torch or something.
That'd have been cool, but then he wouldn't be able to have the blaster for the whole movie.
I'm okay with that because he has the blaster for the rest of eternity.
Yeah. The marketing would suffer, and they already put negative effort into the marketing. But also just that scene, technically, the nighttime campfire scene, then you see Han holding the blaster, and he's holding it like in front of the fire, and it's backlit, and you can't see it.
Yeah.
That bothered me on this rewatch.
I can't say that ever bothered me. I never noticed that though. I'm gonna notice that the next time.
We all know what it looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe that's why I like it though, because again, it's kind of underplayed. Like it's not like this big like spotlight on it with, angelic voices singing like, "Oh my god, this is the blaster." I don't know. But anyway, I like that. Luke, you're wrong. What else you got?
All right. The movie simultaneously has, I think, some of the best writing and some of the worst writing in different parts. There are some lines that I just think are just so perfect, and like it literally rhymes. Like the one I have is when Beckett is saying to Han, like, don't trust anyone, and Han says that's a lonely way to live, and Beckett says that's the only way to live. That's a great line, and it rhymes and it flows and it's good back and forth. Also the line when Han and Kira finally get together and she says, "What should we drink to?" And Han says, "Well, let's drink to and see where it goes." That's a hilarious line, and
Yep.
I
Yeah.
hope to use that if I ever start drinking with people more. That's a hilarious quip, and it flows super well. But then there's also lines that are just super clunky exposition, like when they first introduce Beckett and his team on Mimbin, and Rio says, "Hey, Beckett, I thought you said we were here to do a quick job." "Well, this ain't a quick job."
Yes.
And Beckett says, "It's always something with you." It's like, no, that's kind of fair. And this conversation is kind of fabricated for the point of exposition.
They needed it out.
This is not natural. Yes,
Yeah.
they needed it out, and it did not flow.
This quick job has resulted in you stripping dead troopers of their uniforms and adopting their ranks.
Yes. And then we talked briefly about some clunky exposition in the very beginning. But the one that stands out to me is Lady Proxima saying, "Kira, remember the silo?" It's like, what? Why are we talking about this, Lady Proxima? Like,
I like that type of world building though. That's like
Kira's here. You own her. We get that.
It's
What
like
do you
it's like
mean?
Revenge of the Sith when Obi-Wan talks about how many times Anakin saved him or whatever, and then he says, no, the business on Cato Nemoidia does not count or whatever. It's like, well, what the heck was that about? Like, we don't know what you're talking about, but
was-
it's just world building. There's relationships.
Just
there's
like
more.
Obi-Wan's brother.
Not
Yeah.
like Obi-Wan's
Well,
brother.
that's gonna be a very
Cato
pivotal plot
Neimoidia-
point.
The Cato Nemoidia business is like establishing the kinship between Anakin and Obi-Wan, and this is just establishing, again, similar to the crawl and similar to what we've already seen from that scene alone, that Kira is trapped here in this gang, and it's just the third instance of exposition that we did not need, maybe even one of.
Yeah.
And then the last negative I hope to bring up is my least favorite part in the movie. It is even after several rewatches, even after a rewatch today, when Kira says to Han as he's leaving, like the last time they see each other, and she says, "Smile." That's the word. I always smile when I think of our time together. Like, even having just rewatched that today, I still have to go back and be like, when were you talking about this? What is this a callback to?
Yeah.
I have never once picked up on that scene. That line always falls flat for me. I do not remember what that is referencing.
When did she say it? What is it called back to?
In the first time they meet again on the Vermilion, apparently she says something along the lines of, "Whenever I think on that time," and then she gets interrupted.
That is a
Interesting.
very long gap.
Yes.
That needed
And the
to
movie
be a
does
reminder.
that several times though, because like they mention Beckett says, "Oh, weren't you listening? I told you not to trust anyone." And then Han says right back, "But you said to Chewie that people are predictable and you're no exception." And those are also lengthy
Yeah.
setups and callbacks, but it works because the setup was present. I'm not even convinced that the setup to this Kira
Yeah.
smile moment is even there.
There's a funny line I think from Voss when I think, did I say Quinlan Voss is what I'm thinking? That's not right.
Dryden Voss,
Yeah,
same last name, they're brothers.
Same last name.
Yeah, brothers.
So they, when we found out Kira's bad or whatever, and before Beckett comes in, also where's Beckett just standing, just waiting to be called on? Like, I'm gonna make a cool entrance and piss off Han Solo. He's like, and not because Kira has like an affection for you, which we'll deal with later. And it's so funny to be like, oh yeah, he's a bad guy. That line isn't like bad or anything, but it is like, I don't know. Why have to say that?
I love that scene. That's one of the better Dryden Voss moments because, like, as an audience member, you know that someone's going to betray Han at least once in this scene.
Yeah.
And you're kind of thinking it's going to be Kira, and then he says, "No, not Kira. Kira seems has a soft spot for you."
Yeah.
And then he brings in Beckett, and they play it up, which usually bothers me in movies. They play it up like a big reveal. Like in this movie, when Enfys Nest removes her helmet, which we've talked about before, so I won't get into, they play it up like a big reveal, and who cares? It's a girl, so what?
It's so weird.
But
it's like,
the
and
Beckett-
she's younger than you think, maybe? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe Enfys Nest was a bigger part in Lord Miller's version too.
I don't think so
That-
because she's like a pretty big part in this one, in the version that we got.
I feel like Max might be right, though.
But
Yeah.
Matt thinks that she was involved. Well, she would have been involved in the heist, which you think is a very Lord and Miller scene.
Yeah. Well, I also, I was thinking is like, I feel like that heist scene was later on in the movie.
The-
I think that might have been the climax. In the
I don't know
Lord and
the
Miller
climax,
version.
but I feel like it definitely was the midpoint, maybe, not 40 minutes in. Give me that at
oh,
an
the
hour and
train-
20.
The train heist.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I would say that's okay, but you kind of completely derailed, no pun intended, with the train heist. My train of thought. What was I talking? Oh, the way the movie presents the Beckett betrayal as being like a big jaw-dropping moment,
Yeah.
and as an audience member, you're like, well, kind of expected that Beckett wasn't just going to be done in this movie, and it makes sense, and so that kind of falls flat. But that's not the big reveal of that scene. Like they play it up like it is, and then the reveal is actually that Han anticipated that and saw it coming, and it comes later. And I think that's a great moment.
No, yeah, I love that scene. The line that's funny is just, we'll deal with that later. That's the only part I was talking about.
That's fair.
Did you think I said the whole scene sucked? I'm so
No, I like that line.
Everything was
too.
good except for the third act.
Really?
No, I'm saying that's
Oh,
basically what he would have been saying. I'm surprised that you don't have the dice on your list of cons.
No, that's moving to my list of pros, similar to Han's name, because that is another thing that the
Similar
solo
to
name-
Han's name, though? Or just significantly
Yes,
better
because-
than Han's name?
Similar in a sense that it's so impacted by our out of universe
Yeah.
understanding of that story element, because we saw The Last Jedi and it was like, oh, the dice are apparently a thing, and maybe we'll learn about it in the Solo movie, and then we just keep seeing the dice in the Solo movie, and it's like, why is this? Why do you think this is a thing in Last Jedi? Why does Disney want this to be a thing for merchandising purposes?
Oh, yeah.
But now, like 6 years later, we're saying it's just Han's dice. It's like, okay, yeah, those are his lucky dice. He keeps them with him. The one thing I don't like upon rewatch with the dice was when Kira gives them back to Han when he's a fake prisoner on Kessel, and it's like, hey, couldn't have picked a less risky time to give him his dice back. You guys were just making out like 15 minutes ago. Should have done it then, probably. The dude's got binders on and vertical bind. He can't move his hand left, right, up, or down. He's just going to go goon some guys in an elevator with dice in his hands. That's tough.
That's true. And they were also following a plan that they had discussed beforehand. So it's not even like a moment where it's like, oh, Kira's betraying him. And then she gives him the dice and it's like, oh, no, she's not. She's still like
Right.
playing the long con or whatever. Yeah, it was just like, all right, then we're going to do this. And in Kira's mind, she's like, oh, I'm going to give him his dice back at that point, too. That'll be a good time for that. That is funny. I didn't think about that. Yeah, again, same with the name. I don't know if I'm going to like the dice. I remember all of the dice scenes when I first saw the movie and being like, that was weird. I don't know why they incorporated that so much. And then, or no. Wait, which one came out first? The Last Jedi came out
The
first.
Last Jedi came out
Yeah,
first.
The Last Jedi
And
came out
that's
first.
why it was so jarring to see the dice. 'Cause they
Yeah.
were trying so hard to make it a thing, and it just wasn't before. But now that it
Yeah.
is, it's a thing, and I'm okay with it. And like
Yeah, I'm
the
fine with it
opening,
too.
or it's not the opening shot, but like he hangs them up on the rear view mirror in that speeder in the beginning. It's like, hell yeah, got your dice. Gonna
Yeah.
go do some smuggling.
I guess I in my head I thought Solo had come out first, but no, it was The Last Jedi because I remember that feeling afterwards being like, what was with the dice and having to like explain to people, be like, well, no, the dice was in the Millennium Falcon, like you can see it in a shot of A New Hope, but you have to like pause
like-
it for at the right second or you're gonna miss it.
But imagine not being like a massive Star Wars fan like us, or knowing. I'm saying that like as a brag or something, but like imagine not like knowing that is in that one shot in A New Hope. Like, I think it adds a context to it. Like that's sometimes when I forget is watching. Like it's somebody who watches Star Wars and just likes Star Wars and likes movies and likes to consume things. I sometimes I do forget to like. There's that other aspect of, I guess, of us being like kind of super fans, but I do forget sometimes, specifically with Star Wars or like Batman, for example, to like take a step back and be like, oh yeah, what if you do nothing about this? Like, what does that do? Like when we were talking to Sway about Andor, like what is it like to have no context, which is like not a bad thing, but like what is that like? And I feel like the dice is one of those things that's like, oh yeah, that is a connector for them between those movies now. Versus like us, it's like, okay, they're kind of forcing it. But to them, it's like, if you watch things in chronological order, you see the dice in Solo, and then you end, kind of in Last Jedi, and that's more of an impactful moment, which I think does work. But I don't never know that perspective, really.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, they obviously like explain it within the movie so that you don't have
Yes.
to go into it knowing that those dice were in A New Hope, because
No,
you do
exactly.
see Luke take them off the Millennium Falcon when
Yeah.
he goes on there. But yeah,
Anyway, sorry, I forgot I'm leading this.
no, I'm sorry. I was
sorry,
trying
Luke,
to wait
do you have
for
any
Luke.
more?
Do you
More what? More
Positive?
cons?
Or
No,
yeah.
that's the last negative. I'm ready to get into my positives. 'Cause,
Oh wow, okay, buckle up, folks. I said all my positives already. Did you as well?
probably not? I don't know. Go ahead.
Yeah.
We'll probably trigger some more.
The structure of the movie is spectacular because it's such a inherent Han Solo movie. You know,
Mhm.
it's not like a sweeping space opera like the saga films. It's more personal, and it's just like the tone is a lot darker, and it fits for Han Solo's character. I love that. The Beckett Chewie playing Sabak scene I think is
Yep.
great because that's one of those things where it's I don't know. You keep saying it's a Ron Howard thing versus a Lord and Miller thing, and I've never really thought about it in that light. But now I keep
Dejarik.
finding myself thinking about it like that. Yeah, when they're playing Dejarik, and it's like, did Ron Howard say, "Well, we have to include the Dejarik table because they're on the Millennium
Yeah.
Falcon"? But it's a great scene that Beckett beats him, and then Chewie like wants to get better now, and so that's
Yeah.
a fun lore thing. But also, it lends itself to a good lesson between Beckett and Han that Chewie overhears. The dialogue right after the one that I just said I didn't like, when they first get introduced on Mimban, and Rio says, "Well, this isn't a quick job," and Beckett says, "It's always something with you." Like, that's such clunky dialogue. But then right after that, Beckett and Han have a great scene where Han says, like, "Oh, you're the captain." Beckett says, "Do you want to live?" And Han says, "Very much so." And he says, "Then shut up and do what your captain tells you." That's hilarious.
Yeah, it is. I do like that. I don't like when they joke around. They're like, "Oh, Captain Beckett." It's like, there's no one else being like, "That's weird."
Mm-hmm.
That's the only weird part for that to me in that scene.
And then also it's great in universe, like Imperial lore, that Han was going to blackmail Beckett into joining his crew, and by telling the lieutenant that he's not really a captain, and then Beckett just beats him to it and brings the lieutenant over and says that he's a deserter. I thought that scene is really funny.
Yeah.
There's a lot of just really good stuff. And I talked in my presentation of the greatest deaths in Star Wars that L3 was, I think I put her at like number 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And she's not moving. That was a very well done Star Wars
I agree.
death.
Rewatching it, I think it is.
When she's saying what is happening, it really hits.
It does, and also Donald Glover's performance trying to carry her is so good.
Yeah, that scene hit more this
Yes,
rewatch when
same.
he's picking her up and she
Yeah.
like falls in half and it's like, ugh.
I know.
And he just
Yeah.
takes the top half. That was extra sad. I forgot about that.
I agree.
part.
There was a lot of moments like that that really hit more.
Max, you want to go into some of your pros?
Yeah, one thing that you didn't talk about that I think we should is Han meeting Chewie, because that was a very big moment, and that's definitely a moment that I feel like could have been botched. But I love
Yeah.
how they did it, how they
Same.
threw him into the pit with the monster, and then it realized that it was Chewie and
That-
everything.
and it also feels like when they meet again, after Han is blinded and in Return.
I would say it's reminiscent of that.
I would
yeah.
say, yeah.
I'm not even in on the joke this time. I've never made that connection. That's funny.
Yeah, it's like very much the same.
Mm-hmm.
Screw you, Max.
And then there's another part that I really like right after that, when they're leaving Mimban and they're Chewie and Han are running up to the ship as it's taken off, and they're like, "No, wait!" And then they decide to stop, and they're like, "Ooh, we can get a Wookiee on our team or whatever." And then, like, as they start coming back down, Han turns to Chewie and he says, "See, what did I tell you? Very good friends." Like, that's such a Han thing to do, because Han always says, like, "Oh yeah, I got a friend. Don't worry."
Yup.
And these friends are always people that absolutely hate him, and that was the true case in this one too. They did
Yeah.
not like him.
I do love when he says "very good friends" multiple times throughout this movie. It's very funny.
Yeah.
It hits every time.
And another great use of fan service is when Han says, "I have a good feeling about this."
Yes.
That was
Yeah.
good.
We
I
talked about
like
that in the
that.
trailer, and it works well in the movie too.
It does. It really does.
And we need to talk about the Kessel Run scene, which we should talk about. I think it rules.
It was done so
Yes.
well.
That's another testament to the effects and action set design
Yeah.
in this movie. It's super well done. This is a great action movie, like one of the better ones of this era, independent of it being Star Wars. But one thing that the Kessel Run shows, which is also a few other times in the movie, there are very unique and inventive ways to showcase that Han Solo is a great pilot.
Yeah.
Other than just being like, oh yeah, he beat that person in a race, or he is able to make this obstacle course in a little bit shorter
Yeah.
time. For example, when he does the move that his buddy Needles does, which is a funny line also, when he like puts down the landing gear and scrapes up the ice on that one asteroid in Kessel and
Yeah.
makes the TIE pilot behind him fly through ice shards and it kills him. That is really cool, and I would never have thought to do that. And also when he does like the 180 on the Falcon and smacks a TIE fighter
Yeah.
with the body of the Falcon. There's a couple more times that I'll try to remember, but the movie had a task, obviously, to set Han Solo up as one of the best pilots in the galaxy. It's a recurring theme. He keeps saying he's going to be the best pilot in the galaxy. And they really show you when it would have been super tempting to just tell you that other people say, oh, yeah, he's the best in the galaxy. But
They show you.
they make a big effort
Yeah.
to show you, and it works.
I agree. That's a great call. And I was just saying the Kessel Run. Damn, I don't know what I was gonna say. I think they do a great job of action. Oh, I was gonna say is that obviously we love Star Wars, and I do rank this one a little bit lower towards the bottom. You know, like when we rank the movies, but like honestly, like when I'm thinking about a movie, like this is a very fun movie to throw on. Like if I'm like, do I want to throw on Attack of the Clones? Because I'm like, every time I want to throw on like a movie that's part of the trilogy, I want to watch the full trilogy. And so it becomes more tempting to do that. And so I feel like with Rogue One and Solo, I love being able just to put that on. And like I feel like it's a great movie when you're like not feeling good, you're like sick, and you want to watch some Star Wars. You're like, yeah, I'm gonna throw on Solo because it's a lot of fun. And it's just like you don't have to be like, oh wait, who is that? What happened?
And
Not
to go,
that
to
really
go
do that
back to
much.
the Kessel Run real quick too, because the most famous thing about Han Solo is that he made the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs, and I absolutely love in this movie that they revealed that he didn't actually do it in 12 parsecs. He did it in 12 parsecs if you round down, and I think that is so funny that Chewbacca like tries to correct him. He's like, not if you round down, and then like obviously he spreads word, and that's like how legends are born, and it's not even completely true, and I don't know, I really like that.
It's several instances in that one story beat of good fan service that parsec is a unit of time or a unit of distance and not time, and so that line was kind of hokey in A New Hope, but they found a way that he did make that run in a shorter distance than other people because he's an excellent pilot, and
because
also
L3 was the navigational computer.
Yeah.
and there's more great effects in the Maw, like when that beast is getting sucked into the gravity well and his skin
Yes.
peels off.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Brutal. Absolutely brutal.
And we see that scene where Beckett injects the hyperfuel right into the fusion reactor.
Yeah.
And we see it like travel through the subsystems of the Falcon into
very
the
much
engines.
like Fast and the Furious.
Like Fast and the Furious.
Love
but
that.
It's way more earned in this one.
It
because in
is.
Fast and the Furious, it's just a car. But
Yes.
this one, it could be just a ship, and then it would be just as lame. But it's because they're injecting the hyperfuel that makes it so interesting, and it reacts in a different way.
I agree. This movie is great. It's fun.
It is.
It's I don't know. It made me. I'm sure there's a lot of things that are like even the fact that it's disjointed and you can tell sometimes that it's created by two different people or three different people technically. It's I don't know. It seems great. It's fun. It's one of those things that like it did not get the attention I don't think it deserved when it came out. Because I don't know why. If only people knew kind of what like Star Wars is now, or what like streaming is now, or like our attention spans with TikTok. Like this is pre any. You know what I mean? This is pre Instagram stories. Like this is pre everything. Where it's just like you just have like 3 social medias. It's Facebook, I mean Snapchat, whatever. But like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And then like there was no interesting, flashy things with those even in comparison to now, where everything is just tailored and catered towards you. And I feel like it came out at a weird time. And I feel like if it came out in 2014, it would have been a smash hit. Obviously, I guess we were pre, sequel trilogy, but I just feel
It
like
came out at a very weird time. If it just came out in Christmas of 2018, I think it would
Yeah,
have
because
been
they
a
moved
big
it
hit.
Yeah.
up. It was in May. They had Force Awakens, Rogue One, and The Last Jedi all come out in December, which kind of like trained the public that like, oh, Christmas time is Star Wars time, basically. And then they decided to use this one movie
Yeah.
to do it a different time, and it just happened to be 5 months after a movie that a lot of people
and
didn't care about, and then
Yeah.
that played into it.
there is like this warm, cozy feeling while watching Star Wars that I'm like. For some reason, I'm very excited to watch it during the winter versus the summertime months as well. To be honest,
I think that's why. I think we were trained in that.
I think so. But even before
I
then,
agree
like
with you.
it's weird, right? It's like literally it got cold out like last week. I was like, it's 42 degrees out in Ohio, and I'm like, ooh, New Hope, like and I'm just kind of still in that train where I'm like, oh, I could rewatch all the Star Wars movies now. Versus in the summer, it's like hot. I don't know. I'm just like, for some reason, I don't want to like cozy up and watch Star Wars. I mean, I always want to watch Star Wars, but like, I think there is like that. I don't know that feeling of like watching something new, but yeah, the same thing with Harry Potter. Just, I mean, it makes more sense, I guess, with Harry Potter because it is Christmas time.
I agree
a
with
lot.
Harry Potter.
It
I
just
get that
feels
vibe.
right, cozy, and you want to watch it with like your family and stuff. And I feel like Star Wars too. It's the same thing. It gives you that same, during the holidays or whatever. It feels like it's like warm and cozy, and you want to like be with your family and stuff. And it just feels like that is the essence of Star Wars for some reason too. People finding their families, their people, whatever.
Yeah, I get that. What did you guys think about Darth Maul in this movie?
Loved it.
Absolutely loved it. It was a jaw dropping moment. Obviously, we all want to see what that would come into, and I like the idea of Han running parallel with Maul because it connects the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy more.
But
And
their
I'm like,
lines,
ugh,
they're running parallel, like you said.
Yes.
And I like how you said that because their lines don't cross.
No.
But they are like
they're
connected. Yeah.
one
It's
button
there,
away,
but it's not.
exactly. So I love that.
And it does make sense. Like Maul is alive at this time. Like
Yeah.
what is he doing? Like he can't get vengeance on Palpatine. It's I think it just makes perfect sense. And obviously I want to see more of it. I think a lot of people do. Make Solo 2 happen is like a legitimate hashtag that trends every now and then on Twitter. There's like a Make Solo 2 happen day, but I don't remember when it is.
What a
I'm pretty sure
Weird
it's May 25th, the Solo anniversary, but it's also the A New Hope anniversary, so
Okay.
it's basically just Star Wars Day.
what do you
But
think of? Sorry,
I'll never forget though, like the year or two following when Solo came out, and just consistently seeing people comment on Facebook or Reddit or wherever, people being like, "What did you guys think of Solo? Because I just watched it and I actually really liked it a lot." And all the comments always being like that. People were like, "Yeah, I watched it. It was great."
Yeah,
And
the
it's like,
problem is
everyone loves it.
the problem is those people commented 2-3 years later, not the day of.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the. What did you think of Maul? Also,
I like it as a Star Wars fan.
interesting route you're going.
As like in the movie, it kind of is like
It comes out of left
huh?
field.
yeah.
Yeah, it does.
It comes out of left field, and the movie up until this point is a great standalone movie in the sense that you don't need to
Yes.
see any other Star Wars,
Yep.
and then you get to this scene, and it's like I imagine. I remember seeing it with my wife the first time. She was like in it all the way, the whole movie, and then that scene happened. She's like, "What the hell is that? That's completely different than the rest of the movie. I
Yeah.
feel lost all of a sudden." And it's like in the last 10 minutes of the movie. So I don't know. I like the lore aspect of it in terms of Solo as a movie. I think it could have done without, maybe,
Yeah.
but
I like it. It feels like a post-credit scene.
It does.
It does feel like
It
a
also
post-credit scene.
feels.
And I'm glad that it's not. I don't want Star Wars to have post-credit scenes.
It feels like not. I won't say safeguarding in any way because it's obviously not. Because here we are years later, 5.5, 6 years later, and we have no news of Solo 2 or not even Solo 2. Just like these stories going forward. But if we know anything about Star Wars, eventually it will pay off because they always do it.
And I think that's why it feels out of place for Solo, is because it just hasn't paid off yet. Because they, in my opinion, clearly included it wanting to do something more with that storyline.
Oh yeah.
I don't think they would just do that just to like be like, oh, that's a fun cameo. I think they had an idea and they were like, oh, if this movie's successful, we can go this route. And unfortunately, it just wasn't successful. And that's why it probably feels like it's out of place. But
Which is why there's no way there ever was going to be a Solo 2 and 3 though. Like I don't see that happening. So it's like
it could
it
happen.
won't be it won't be a direct sequel, but it'll be
like
a
even
continuation of the story.
I think so, but even then, I just don't see like in 2018 if they were like this movie's huge. Still don't see them doing a Solo 2.
Because like the format that we're going with like each individual
Yes.
character a Star Wars story.
Yeah.
And it would have been weird, like because you're obviously not going to get a Rogue One sequel.
No,
They were also still looking at the time of like what kind of TV shows they can do for Disney Plus and
Yeah.
stuff. So maybe that was a
Yeah,
thought that they had.
That's why I still feel I still have hope for the Lando movie, even though I know we were talking about how you guys don't. I still feel like it can be thematically connected to Solo because there's no way they're not going to pay that story off a little bit. And then the other part of me is just like, well, they have all these pieces that everyone's waiting for to be inched further. Even if it's not the thing, if it's a connector, the third thing can be a Maul show. Like,
The thing,
you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be Maul's the big bad guy of the Lando movie or something, but like
Yeah.
maybe it's the middle ground. So it's like, oh yeah, start in Solo. He's got a cameo. I mean, it's literally the Emperor. A small cameo, a one scene, and then you have his own movie or something.
That's another thing I don't love about the Maul in this movie is the design of him. They brought back Ray Park, who's obviously 25 years older, and Maul looks 25 years older, and he has the robot legs, which it's, in terms of this movie, you can barely notice. You have to look for it. But when you look at Maul and he's got like the hologramness of him, and he's being dubbed by Sam Witwer, and I don't know if you can tell or if I'm just looking for it, but he looks a little hokey, and it's way more noticeable in just the promo pictures of Maul from this movie. I think it looks bad. Like if there's ever a character that you want to make age slower
Does weird-
for it, I'm glad I'm in the minority.
he's talked one, but then he lost it in the Phantom Menace, and then he makes this one in Clone Wars. And then and he kind of like
That's funny.
instructed him, and then he was like, and then he has like a third one. It's like a Kane in Rebels, but that'll be later.
That scene, the lightsaber crabbing, I don't love though. That admittedly, because that's like,
It's
why
it's
should
out of left
ignite it?
field.
Yeah,
I
it's like
know.
Because
that's
it's
fan
it's,
service. But it's like we
It's
know
fan service, but it's
in-
also like kind of like an exposition, like for the audience who may not have seen like Clone Wars. It's like, hey, just so you know, this is Darth Maul. Like
Yeah.
we're going to show you the lightsaber to just like really seal it home for
Yeah.
you.
And like in universe, it's like an intimidation factor for Kira, and he says we're going to be working a lot more closely now, and I think it's implying that he's going to start training her in combat,
Yeah.
maybe the Force, but we've seen that in the comics that she was trained by Darth Maul in combat.
She holds her own against Vader. She doesn't beat him, spoiler alert, but she does hold her own in combat. And the last thing that I want to add to is moving on from Solo. Where does it go? The Lando, maybe it's like a thematic sequel and stuff, but I'm just so worried about Lando because they had that big thing about how it's going to be written now by Donald and Steven. And it's like, to me, I'm like, why are we talking about this if it's not written?
Yeah.
Why are we talking about Lando at all? Like, that's not...
Don't
announce a
I
project
know.
and then be like, okay, now we're gonna write it. Like, no, write it. Like,
Yeah.
make sure you have something
Just do the
and then
thing.
talk about it.
Yeah.
So that's what makes me nervous. I'm
They-
like, we're talking about projects again before we have the
Yeah,
ideas.
They always do that.
I've talked about that before. I just saw in the news this past week that Kevin Feige's movie is no
saw
longer
that.
moving forward, and it's like, yeah, he actually never wrote anything, and it's like, I'm not even surprised. Why was this ever a talking?
'Cause
point?
you had
All they do, they just
conversations?
attach cool people to it, and then they're like, all right, so tell me what you can come up with. And then-
So weird. Anybody have anything else? I just want to do one more segment of just basically rating the movie out of 10.
I never know how to rate.
yeah,
anything
Luke's scale is
anymore.
weird.
Yeah,
with
Luke's
Star
scale is
Wars.
weird, but Luke, let's start with you. How would you rate it out of 10?
I'll give it as a movie
That's what it is.
A perfect 10.
Interesting.
As
Okay.
a Star Wars movie, an 8.
That is so. If anything, that seems reversed, Luke. But I can't. This is Max is spooky and scary.
It is similar to that. It makes sense
Usually,
in
when
my
you're like on a
mind.
Star Wars movie, it's a 10 out of 10. Of a regular movie, it's 8 out of 10. Because I can also appreciate, that's running with the Godfather or something. So
That's funny. I give it a very solid 7 out of 10.
interesting. What for your other example? What's Last Jedi for you? Your favorite Return of the Jedi. Sorry, your favorite Star Wars movie. What is that out of 10?
I would give it a 9 out of 10.
Interesting. I would give New Hope a 10 out of 10, which is my favorite Star Wars
No,
movie.
you can't give it a 10 out of 10 because then you're saying that nothing can ever be better than it.
No, then you're saying
No,
you
you
gotta
gotta give
what your
yourself room
favorite
to
thing
grow.
is. You have to give something a 10 out of 10, and you have to give something a 0 out of 10.
Yes,
And
exactly.
everything
Well,
else has to fall between.
I don't think I have a 0 out of 10 of like a movie, but like yes,
For something to be a 10 out of 10, you have to be able to say that can't get better.
yeah. I
no,
think
it just has to be better than everything else.
I think
No, because then that's not a rating. You're just ranking it again.
well, like on like IMDb
Yeah,
for my
that's true.
movies.
That's
Out of
true.
all the movies I have, I think I have maybe 10 out of 10s, and that's like 3,800 movies. I think.
Which ones are they? Do you know?
I mean, some of my favorite movies are Shaun of the Dead, The Dark Knight, A New Hope. I think Raiders of the Lost Ark. I want to say,
Even a high 10.
yeah. I mean, that's
That's
because
a weird system to me.
But it's not because if you're looking at my other movies that are like 6 out of 10s, I mean 6 out of 10 is not good. That's a D. I mean, like a lot of my movies are in the 7s because if I'm like, what else is a 6 out of 10? It's like these like shitty horror movies that are like fun but they're not very good.
You see, I consider like a
It's
6 out of
too
10
bad.
like better than it is bad. Like I would
Yeah,
say a 6 out
yeah.
of 10 is like a decent movie. Like I would say like I have no
Mm-hmm.
regrets watching a 6 out of 10 movie.
Most of my movies are the movies that I think are fine are 7s. 8s are great. I think 9s are stellar. 10s are like favorite movies. Like I mean, most of my all my favorite movies of all time are 8s through 10s. There's no 7s in there because that's 7s are just fine movies.
Yeah, as they should be. Those are top tier.
Yeah, but I don't think any Star Wars movie is a 7, really below a 7 for me at all. Because they're good movies. 6 is not great. Anyway,
Interesting.
anybody have any force for thought?
I do. It is.
Bad time to put away your. You did. It's not a notebook.
It's not notes. It's
Ooh.
gifts.
Oh my God, Luke.
Son of a bitch!
I
you
brought
did it
gifts for
again.
Matt and Max.
Oh my word!
I didn't get you anything,
That's okay.
man. I thought you put your notebook away. I was like, bad time to put the notebook away, Luke.
Ooh, it's a comic. It's
Is it the High Republic comic?
the Han
Oh,
Solo.
it's the Han Solo
It's the
comic.
Han Solo collection. So this is the Han Solo miniseries issues 1 through 5.
Oh.
It was a miniseries from 2015, I think, and it's a very good one.
Oh, good.
Luke, I've never read this. Thank you so much. I am so excited. This comic looks beautiful.
Good. I'm glad you guys like it. I got it for Han Solo Day. I wanted to wear a vest too, but I don't think I own one.
Oh, I should have wore a vest. Damn, we should really text this before.
But that's my force for thought. So thanks for listening, everybody. Follow us on socials. Let us know what you think about the Solo movie. Are you rewatching it for the 5.5 year anniversary like we did? Reach out to
Kills
us
me.
on.
This is a 5-year. This is a 5-year later review.
See us on TikTok and Instagram. You can email us, and we'll tell you next week.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. See you, Sammy.